Hi folks, welcome to the A Minute to Midnight Show. This is Tony coming to you from New Zealand, and with me on the show today I have Leo Hohmann. Leo's been a frequent guest on the A Minute to Midnight Show, and I always learn a lot from having Leo on and really enjoy our discussions. So it's great to have you back.
I'm good. Thanks for having me on, Tony.
It's always good. Now, I'm not sure exactly where you want to go with this one, so I'll just throw it straight to you. You can take it where you know what's on your mind.
Well, I mean, I've been writing a lot about transhumanism on my website, leohohmann.com. I've been writing a lot about the Russia war against NATO. I'm not even calling it a war between Russia and Ukraine anymore, Tony, because it seems to be a proxy war where NATO and Russia, China are going to have a final showdown. And I don't think it's going to be, the spark is going to be lit in Eastern Europe, but just like the other world wars, it will grow out from there. And I'm writing a lot about that at my new Substack, which is leohohmann.substack.com. So we could maybe, since that's the more hot issue right now, I guess we should say, we could start by talking about that and where each of us sees that going. Yesterday, there was a significant escalation that I reported at my Substack. The title of the article was Major Escalation, Drone Attacks Strike Deep Inside Russia, Targeting Nation's Oil Industry. And these were drone attacks that hit an oil depot and lit it on fire. The drones hit about 5 targets, I believe, altogether, including one in what appeared to be a residential neighborhood, but there were no deaths. I don't think there were any injuries. These drones are apparently not capable of carrying really heavy payloads, but they can do major damage, as the one did that hit the oil depot and set it on fire. I think that is very symbolic of what this war is all about, Tony. Wars are fought over resources, and world wars are fought over critical resources. And what we see going on, we cannot look at it in isolation or in a vacuum. Russia invaded Ukraine in February of 2022, and it's just one of those border wars, ethnic disputes going back hundreds of years. Yeah, we know all that, and that's true. Ukraine's only been a nation since 1992, and yet we're supposed to think that we somehow can't survive as a free country in places like the United States or Germany or New Zealand if we don't fight these Russians off in Ukraine and defeat them totally, give Vladimir Putin a, quote, strategic defeat. That has come out of the mouths of several Western politicians, that we're not just trying to, give him a little slap on the hand and make sure he pulls out of Ukraine. We want to see him completely defeated. And so now that raises a larger question that maybe this is about more than Ukraine. And so what is it about? I believe it's about globalism and the shape of this new global reset that the globalists want to bring about. So what do they want in their ideal utopian Great Reset and Fourth Industrial Revolution? They want a smaller population. Okay, World War would accomplish that. The population that's left over, they want to run on renewable energy or so-called green energies. Okay, well, we know that that's another reason why we have to have depopulation, because if everybody were to trade in their gas-fueled cars and their gas stoves and their gas furnaces for electric, there's no way on earth we have a grid that could support that. Our electric grid here in the United States, I don't know about New Zealand or Australia, but our electric grid is already maxed out today here in the United States. We have certain days during peak summer months when people's electricity goes off for an hour or so, and they're told to set their temperature at a higher rate so the air conditioners don't have to run as heavily because the power grid is already stressed. Well, what if we added about 200 million new electric cars to that? The math simply does not work. And so you look at how could it work? Number one, much smaller population. And then only the wealthy would be driving around in their electric cars, and the rest of us serfs would be taking public transportation or riding our bikes. Okay? Number two, you have to neutralize or eliminate the competition. And that's where the Russian war, the war against Russia, comes into play. Russia's economy is fueled by selling cheap oil and gas to Europe, China, and India, and other countries. As long as Vladimir Putin is out there with his pipelines in tow and selling this cheap energy, fossil fuel energy, there's no way that the West, going to renewable, can compete with that. All of the people who have invested in this renewable energy, you know, the billionaires, Soros, Gates, Buffett, they will not see the return on their investment that they're looking for unless they can eliminate a good portion of the competition coming from a more efficient source of energy, which is the fossil fuels. So we must eliminate Putin. We must do a regime change and get a more Western-friendly, green energy-friendly puppet stooge into the Kremlin. And that's what this world war that we're about to get into, we're already in a world war, but it's being fought with Ukrainian soldiers right now against Russia. After we burn through all of those soldiers and Ukraine has nothing left to give, and all their blood has been spilled, we're going to have to put actual boots on the ground, American boots, Australian boots, Canadian boots, Western European boots. It's going to take everything we have to win this war and take out Putin so we can get on with our climate change agenda and our green energy utopia. That's my take on it, Tony.
I noticed that there are people I see that are almost seeing Putin as some sort of savior or Putin as some sort of anti-New World Order, hero. And yet I think that's equally as wrong. There's probably vying for how the New World Order will work, but I believe Putin and China are still on board with a New World Order. They are not anti-New World Order. It's just they probably don't necessarily want it exactly how the Western elites want it. So there's a vying for the position in it.
Therein lies the rub. Exactly. You just put your finger on it. Putin wants a world order that respects his position as a dominant provider of fossil fuel-based energy. That's how he funds his army. That's how he butters the bread of the working Russian person. You take that away from him, and Russia could quickly be in a third world type status. And so I'm not saying I personally don't know Putin, okay? I personally don't know what type of world order he's looking for. One thing I do know is Putin is looking out for the interests of Russia and himself. Russia's interests and Putin's interests do not align with those of the West and the World Economic Forum. Maybe he thought they would at one point, but it's been made painfully clear to him that he is not welcome in this new world order unless he capitulates to the new economic structure that's being ushered in. And that structure has no place for fossil fuels, none. They're all announcing that they're going to phase out the gasoline car by 2035 to 2050. They're now talking about phasing out gas stoves, smart meters on all the homes, tracking everyone in real time. He might be fine with the tracking but he cannot accept the elimination of gas and oil and fossil fuels. That just does not jibe with the Russian economy. It's not a good fit. And so maybe he was on board with it until they presented the terms. And then he said, nope, I'm sorry, can't go there. You're going to have to rewrite the plan. And when we wouldn't rewrite the plan, okay, the two sides are going to war.
But it will achieve, to achieve what you're saying is, a global less population and more controlled population than what is left. And you've only got to look at, I'd like to do more on it at some time. NEOM in Saudi Arabia with their line and their cube and the whole, everyone into these smart 15-minute cities, and that kind of thing. And that's where this whole World Economic Forum's version of the New World Order, the Great Reset, Fourth Industrial Revolution or whatever, it's so obvious where they're trying to take this, and it shouldn't. Well, it's obvious to people like us, but the average person still doesn't have a clue that's where it's going. I saw a video in Oxford in England where they had protests because they've got their 2024. They're going to be bringing in restrictions in Oxford for people being able to get in and out only 100 days a year. So that to have that 15-minute city, and there were thousands of people protesting in Oxford against that, but there were still tons of people in Oxford that didn't even know that's what's coming in 2024. So, like if the people really understood what this New World Order is all about and that you'll be owning nothing and be perfectly happy type of thing and stuck in smart cities where you don't own anything and can't travel anywhere much apart from on public transport, as you say, within a small area, and they're selling that as some wonderful thing instead of telling us, we are taking your freedom away. You won't be able to do this, you won't be able to do that. And there's so many, of course, of the very youngest ones are being indoctrinated in this stuff right from the word go, and they don't know what older folks like us have lived through, and seeing the eroding of our freedoms, and then, then they, push this climate agenda and whatever so strongly now. And as you mentioned, World War, and then, of course, the other player in that is China. And I do notice you sent out one of your Substack things out recently where you said China was negotiating with Russia to sell them drones as well. So...
Right. And the U.S. government, I don't know if you saw this, Tony, but yesterday, the U.S. Department of Energy came out and said that, that conspiracy theory that people were talking about, where they were saying that the coronavirus was manufactured in a lab. And where was that lab? Oh, that lab happened to be in Wuhan, China. And the most likely origin of the COVID-19 virus was that lab. Now, we don't know if it was released, how it was released, whether a mistake or on purpose, but we're reasonably confident, not 100%, but we're somewhat confident now that that's where that virus came from. And 3 years into it, no apology. What about all of the folks like me and you and others who said that that was where it originated from the get-go?
Absolutely.
From the very beginning, and we were called conspiracy theorists. We were censored from Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and our articles would not show up in Google when people searched for them.
Yeah.
But now suddenly it's okay to criticize China and say that's the likely origin of this virus that turned everybody's life upside down for 2-3 years. And why are they doing that? I find the timing very suspect. After 3 years of lying to us, now it's okay to criticize China because it fits their narrative because why? China is now thrown in with Russia. China came out last week and said, we are ready to join forces with Russia, quote unquote. The top diplomat of China, that's a quote from him. Mr. Yi Wang. He said, we are now ready to join forces with Russia and fight for our national interests against the West. And so that's why suddenly the U.S. government has pivoted, not because they cared about the truth or not because they cared that we the people were called conspiracy theorists. No, because they now realize that it's in their interest to get the American people to hate China and be whipped up into a war frenzy because China's now with Russia. They should have known that all along, but apparently they're too stupid. Go ahead.
Oh, Tucker Carlson interviewed some Chinese lab doctor lady who, worked in China on all those types of things. And she came out recently and said she believes that it was deliberately released, not just, it's an accident. So there's
Absolutely. I think that's Yi Minyan is her name or something. That's the other quite comical thing about the U.S. government. Whenever they do admit that, we were telling you a lie for all this time, they dribble out part of the truth, right? It's called a limited hangout, where that's what they call it in a PSYOP, a psychological operation. Let's do a limited hangout. Let's dribble out part of the truth, but while continuing to withhold the core truth. Now, the core truth is that this isn't just a Chinese virus made at a Chinese lab. This is a U.S. virus that was engineered by U.S. scientists in a lab at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and Fort Detrick. And at some point, when it became too dangerous and possibly illegal, that's when they moved it over to China. Okay, they outsourced it to China because in China, anything goes. You can harvest the organ out of a living person. In China, they have no rules for this sort of thing, this sort of Dr. Mengele research. And so they sent it over there, and China was more than willing to comply. And who knows what they were given in return for that compliance.
So what's going to happen to people like Fauci? Is he going to be and should be thrown under the bus? His role
he will never be arrested. Never. Because Dr. Ralph Barrick is another one. Dr. Ralph Barrick was the lead director of that research going on at the University of North Carolina, and he did it with funds provided through Fauci's agency.
Yeah, it's sickening.
And Fauci lied under oath about that in testimony before Congress. And so the man he seems not to be worried at all, and he has good reason for that, because he knows he has people in very powerful places who have his back. Just like Hillary Clinton was never worried about being arrested. They were chanting, lock her up, at Trump rallies in 2015 and 2016. Did she ever get locked up? No. The day that Donald Trump was elected, he reneged on that talk. And he said, when people asked him, well, are you going to have Hillary arrested? He said, oh, no, that was just campaign rhetoric.
Yeah, the Clintons are good people, he said, basically. Basically it was a PR, program to get him and elected.
That was a PR stunt. Yeah, exactly. To get him to get more support for his candidacy.
Yeah. And then going back to the CV, because we've both covered Event 201, which I don't believe was any coincidence whatsoever that occurred just 2 months before the release of the coronavirus, and so which leads me even more to believe that the whole, well, not just Fauci, but there was a much bigger and deeper agenda behind this, and it has been ultimately, to get people lining up for the what, and to control people and bring us into that kind of a system. And it's very interesting.
Yes, it's very true, very true.
I mean, I'm noticing the New Zealand media, very left-wing media here in the last couple of days, whereas they've conspiracy theorists, this and that, and made anti-V people look really bad, suddenly there's a couple of articles which are almost pandering to the protests that we had here in New Zealand, and instead of in the past, you're a bunch of idiots and blah blah blah, they're almost giving it some credence a year on, and I'm wondering why the shift all of a sudden for this left-wing media to now not be labeling those that protested against the mandates some sort of terrible criminals like they have up until now. And you look at these things in the media and you think, what's the agenda going on here when they suddenly switch to that,
Yes.
Because basically we've had no restrictions in New Zealand for months and months now. Like, you still cannot, I cannot still, as a New Zealander that hasn't had it, get into the United States of America. Like, I can't. Without that passport for the V, I can't get into the United States, which is one of the few countries still holding on to that. But in New Zealand, all of that's gone months and months ago, and and we're not all dying, but Biden's still pushing that for whatever reason. I don't know, but I'm just noticing that there's a shift in the attitude.
This is the belly of the beast over here. Don't ever forget that, and don't ever kid yourself. The belly of the beast for the New World Order is in New York City, Washington, D.C., and London, England. Mm-hmm. If I had to pick the three most powerful cities who are made up of the very ethos of the New World Order, who reflect the values of the New World Order, it would be those three cities. And what the rest of the world does, is up to them. But this New World Order that wants to foment this technocratic 24/7 surveillance society where you have to show your digital papers and you have to be a good little boy. And if you're not, guess what? We'll freeze your bank account. That's what happened in Canada, right?
Yeah.
When the truckers stood up and got out of line and got a little too big for their britches, they froze their bank accounts. That's where this is heading. Okay, that's the type of society that we're heading into in what I call the formerly free world of the United States, Canada, Western Europe, Australia, New Zealand. These are being flipped. Okay, they're being flipped from free countries to dictatorships. Yeah. Right now, it's a little bit hard for some people to recognize it because it's what you would call a soft dictatorship. But they want to make it a lockdown, hard dictatorship like China. China is the model. The technocrats here all worship and adore the technocrats in China because they don't have to go through these processes and pass certain laws. If they want to do a lockdown, or they just do it. And we saw some of that in COVID, but you're only able to get away with that here if you have an emergency. Whereas in China, they can do it for any reason or no reason at all. In these Western countries, they need a reason still. Okay. And so that's why they love emergencies. And and we're about to cede the authority for what constitutes a health emergency from our national governments to the UN World Health Organization, the WHO. That's coming up for a vote in May at the World Health Assembly. And who's pushing that the hardest? The United States, the UK, Trudeau of Canada, Australia, New Zealand. The same cast of characters are the ones pushing that transfer of sovereignty from national governments to this global UN body, the WHO. Russia's against it. A bunch of African countries voted against it last year, and so it was defeated.
Yeah.
They're bringing it up again this year, and it'll be interesting to see how many of those nations at the World Health Congress in the last week of May, the World Health Assembly, will vote for this. I would be willing to bet that we've bribed them, we've offered them some sort of compensation for changing their vote.
Well, didn't
like
Bolsonaro in Brazil? He was one that voted, I think, against it the last time. Of course, he's gone, and now they've got a different regime in Brazil. So Brazil will probably go along with it. So that'll be one less.
100%. Brazil now has a socialist. Brazil has become a socialist dictatorship now, so they'll have no problem with it. The question marks are going to be Russia, the African nations, and it'll be interesting to see what China does now that we're falling into a Cold War with China.
Yeah, yes, it will be interesting to see what happens there and what changes they've actually brought to the original, proposal that got voted down last year.
Right.
But they're obviously not going to let it just disappear. And even if they don't get it through this time, they'll push it again in another year or whatever. So, it's.
And another thing to watch, like you said, they've relaxed all these restrictions from COVID, but now what are they doing? They're talking about bird flu and how dangerous that could be. It's apparently jumped from the animal to the human species. And they're starting to ratchet up the fear, Tony, the fear porn about bird flu.
Yeah. I think it'll be harder to sell lockdowns to people this time around, but who knows? I mean, if they scare people
saying
enough,
this bird flu could have a 50% kill rate.
So then everyone will run inside and hide. Yeah.
Yes, right.
Yeah. Yes, it is a bit of a concern. For sure. So are there any other things before we look, to wrap up that have been on your mind with all of this?
Just that I think I've laid out my position on the coming World War III and the reason for it. And the vaccine passports, the restrictions on coming and going, the restrictions on freedom of movement, that's all coming back if these people get their way. We have to continue doing what we're doing, Tony, make a stand for truth, wake up people. And, every day I'm seeing another person come alive and come awake. And I just pray that we have more time to continue doing what we're doing and get people awake to what's happening and help them connect the dots to realize that their government is not to be trusted, and anybody who trusts the government is not to be trusted. So this is what we need to do, more of the same.
Yes, true. And just one thought from my thinking about things is the whole climate agenda, which you've mentioned, they're going to use to push, and they'll probably use that as an excuse for some sorts of lockdowns and whatnot as well. And we've had
that's what the 15-minute cities are all about, right?
Yes.
They don't have to tell you that they don't have to formally declare a health emergency, although I think they'd love to do that with regard to climate change. They could just tie it to your finances. That you live in this 15-minute city, and if you break the rules, which a 15-minute city, by the way, is nothing more than a smart city with some extra rules and regulations. That's all it is. And all the major cities are being converted to smart cities where they're able to surveil and monitor everybody 24/7. Well, why would they want to do that? So they can control your movement.
Yeah.
And so they don't have to declare a formal health emergency. All they have to do is tie it to your finances. You break the rules, your digital money bank account is now frozen. Your health insurance now won't work. You can't get health care. You can't buy fuel for your car. You can't buy fuel for your gas stove. You know, they have ways, extra legal ways. That's why they call it a color revolution, because they're doing this under the cover of law, but they don't need to actually change laws to do it. Not when they have 90%, 95% of the largest corporations ready and willing to do their bidding.
Yes, yeah, it's a bit of a sobering thing, and
the look how eager the large banks were in Canada to cooperate with the government and shut down the bank accounts of those protesting truckers.
Yes, well, that's true, and yeah, and the more digital it all goes, the easier it will be for them to do that.
Easier it will become, right?
Yeah. So I guess we have to just keep our focus really on warning people, but ultimately, you know, if it's God's timing and this is the times that Jesus warned us of, then really we're not going to be able to stop the beast rolling, you know, into power.
But it's not about that. It's not necessarily about stopping it. If anybody is in this fight because they think they're going to stop it, I would advise them to go and have a comfortable life, golfing and gardening and going to watch movies. We fight this because it's true, and we fight this because it's right. Just like the Christians throughout history did. Some of them had to pay with their own blood. But even in their martyrdom, what happened? They gave a powerful testimony to the truth. And that's what we're here for every day, to take up our cross and follow him.
Yeah, true. And for people to understand what's going on. And then when ultimately it comes to you have to make a choice to, you know, take the mark of the beast or whatever, people are going to be aware and go, we know what this is. No, we're not taking it, even if it does cost you your life or your freedom.
Right.
Yeah.
Well said. You just nailed it. Correct. Yep.
Well, thank you, Leo. I know you've had a long day of interviews and things today, so I'll let you go.
Yes. Bottom line is, like you said, we don't want people taking the mark of the beast or any of these lead ups to the mark of the beast ignorantly and deceptively being fooled by it. We want people, if they're going to make the wrong decision, at least they will know what they're doing.
Absolutely. And for those of us that, you know, are Christians and trusting God, we've just got to get our eyes off the world in a sense and onto the Lord and realize that we're just pilgrims on this life. This isn't our real home, and nothing here on this life is worth forfeiting our salvation for anyway, because it's temporal and the eternal is what really matters. So folks, we need to, I think, I mean, I'm challenging myself here too. We need to get our eyes onto what's eternal and what's of true value. And if you don't know Jesus as your Lord and Savior, it's time you do some research on that and make a decision, you know, because time is getting short. So thank you, Leo. It's a great interview.
100% spot on. Well said, Tony. And thanks for having me on.
And we'll do it again soon, eh?
Amen. Thanks.
Cheers. And folks, don't forget, visit leohohmann.com. That's where you'll find Leo's work. And also aminutetomidnight.com. Make sure that you subscribe to our website, aminutetomidnight.com. And we do run A Minute to Midnight 100% by donations. A huge thank you to the people that do donate to keep us running. And if you want to do that, you can at aminutetomidnight.com. So a big thank you to folks that help us. And the music used I've written, played and recorded. And there is some free music of mine on aminutetomidnight.com, which you can download as well. So God bless, and God willing, we'll be back with another video in a few days' time.